Do you have the examples you were saying of other teams and how they've built out their offensive lines and maybe do the compare and contrast there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's look at some of the teams right now that I was even talking about, the teams with the stronger offensive lines. I'm going to look at their depth charts, and we'll start with Detroit.
My favorite is how close your head gets to the camera when you pull up a website.
So people love to point out, like, oh, they're so far ahead of us in the rebuild. Why are they winning? Why is it all working out for them? First of all, it's two different situations. When JT took over, when Saleh took over the New York Jets, we literally that year had stripped the roster completely. The only person left from pre-20 is Quinnen Williams, one player. And we can look and see how many more players other teams have. So they already had more people on their roster to build around. With Detroit, that includes a quarterback, because they were able to trade their quarterback for a functional quarterback, which is something we all know we didn't have. We had to start by using our number 2 pick on a quarterback, which was probably a mistake in hindsight. But every team is in a different situation. So if we look at this offensive line, you see a left tackle that's been there since 2016. You see a left guard that's been there from 2020. You see a center who's been there from 2018. Now, this guy, I don't want to say his name. He was brought in. He was brought in because Colby wasn't ready yet. But you see that they have a guy waiting that they're developing for right guard. And then you see Sewell, who, of course, they drafted in a year that we could have drafted him. So there's your, it's 4 out of 5 guys that that were drafted that are on this offensive line. They're also, just to mention, and this is part to do with luck and things like that, is that all 5 of these were return starters, right? So this was the second year this unit played together as a unit.
Right. Now, they also had, I believe they had Graham Glasgow, too, at some point. I don't see him.
Oh, yeah, he's there. He's there.
Okay, he started.
He was in the second string. He got, I think it was an injury or something, or Ragnar may have beaten him out for the job.
Yeah. So that's a heavy draft focus there with that offensive line, and clearly it's worked for them. And you bring up a good point too, with like the position they are and where they are is because they were able to trade their quarterback, an asset that they had, and get another serviceable quarterback out of it and other draft picks. So that obviously helps.
Sure. It helps. It's a major difference because they didn't have to use those early picks on a quarterback. They actually gained a pick by making that trade with the Rams. So they got a quarterback who ended up being pretty good, and they got more draft capital from it. So here's Philadelphia, an offensive line we know very well. We've played them a couple of years in a row. Anybody who follows football knows about their running game and, their offensive line. And if we look at this, you'll see that all 5 were drafted. All 5 are returning starters year after year, like from one year to the next. Look how many were there with history, right? Kelsey's been there since 2011. Jordan's been there since 2018. Lane Johnson's been there for 2013. Just on their offensive line, they have more guys on a second contract than we have on our entire team. I mean, we have pretty much, unless you want to count Hennessy, we have Quinnen Williams, right? Look at the amount of players they have on a second contract. Right?
Yeah, it's vastly different. It's vastly, but they were also able to get, like, these guys, they're not all first rounders. They have, like, Dickerson was a second rounder, Kelsey a 6th rounder, Mailata a 7th rounder. So they've been able to find and develop talent better than the Jets have so far.
Absolutely, but is it because they're able to find better talent, or is it because we give up on players too soon before we develop them? Like, I'm forgetting his name. Was it Chinooga? Somebody that Green Bean loves, that he was a tackle. We got rid of him because he couldn't be a tackle. Everybody, a lot of us were screaming, make him a guard. And then I forgot what team he went to. He's playing guard, and he's playing it well. So
Yoga?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's finding. I think that's they need to do a better job of scouting. I think these other teams have a more established rosters and cores because of their scouting ability.
I think we are now. I mean, let me give you an example. Carter Warren, and you know this, and I know you're on board with this. We got him in the 6th round. He's a 2nd-round talent, but he got hurt on Pittsburgh and missed the end of that season. And they knew he was going to miss camp. So he didn't play and miss camp with us. He got healthy in the middle of the season. He's a rookie with no camp. Came in, was absolutely serviceable. He needed help. He's raw, but he was serviceable. And right away, people are assuming that that's who he is. And that's what – now, I'm not saying he should be our starting tackle next year. I know that that's too risky and we can't rely on that. But – how many of our fan base, and hopefully not the organization, are ready to give up on Carter Warren being one of these kind of guys, a solid starter that's on this team for the next 5 to 8 years? I mean, who says he can't develop as a starter?
I hope the hope is that he can. I don't think, and I know you're not saying this, but I don't think I'm comfortable going into a season with him as the starter. But if you go into camp and he's progressing, then that's a good sign for, you know, the future. Maybe he's a swing tackle this year, and down the line, he's your starting right tackle.
Right.
That's got to be your plan at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know it's too late for next year. It's too late. Like I'm not saying this is what we have to, like, I understand we are way too late to do this for next year. So we have this interesting balance of, we have this small window with Aaron Rodgers. We want to have a chance to win a Super Bowl. And at the same time, I don't know about you, but I don't want to set it up that if we don't win the Super Bowl, we have to start from scratch all over again. Right? I want to, after the Rodgers years are over, I want to still have that good roster that just needs a quarterback.
I don't think it has to be that. I think you could have I don't think it has to be you're all in and then you have to blow the whole thing up after 2 years. But I also don't think you have to go full just draft for the future and kind of punt on the right now either. I think you got to find the balance of it. That's
the trick. It's the balance. And that's where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in the middle of the balance. I want to use free agency to help this team. And if there's the right tackle or guard out there that we really believe in, and we don't have to overpay to where it's gonna, like, you know, deplete the team somewhere else, I'm 100% for it and positive. I think that's going to happen with a playmaker more likely than with an offensive lineman. But if JD finds the guys out there, if he finds the right contracts and gets the right guys, I'm absolutely fine with that.
Do you have any other examples besides the Eagles too?
Sure. Well, Atlanta has a great offensive line. That's one of the strengths of that team that they've created over the last few years. And that's another team where we have 4 for 5 returning starters from the year before. And you can see this is a guy we all love, Matthew Bergeron. We all loved him. He took the job from Hennessy. Otherwise, they would have had 5 for 5 returning starters. But you'll see they were all drafted. 2 of them were there since 2019. They were both first rounders. Jake Matthews was there, obviously, since 2014. And then they have their center since 2021. So here's 5 for 5 drafted and all returning starters. Now, again, it's not our fault that the guys get injured. That's a lot of reason why we're not returning the same guys. But it's just another example of, you know, here's another powerhouse offensive line, and this is how it was built. And, like, again, I don't want it to come off that I'm arguing that we have to do this, that we have to say, screw Aaron Rodgers, screw everything. Let's start rebuilding this way. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that. I'm not claiming that. I'm just showing that at some point moving forward, this is where we have to get. I feel like we might be on our way. Just what you said, Matt. If Tippmann is developed and retained, if AVT comes back healthy and is retained, if we draft a guy this year, obviously, if a guy like Fuaga and stay with him for years, if Carter Warren later in the future is even if he's a swing tackle, we are heading down that path. And that's just the path I'd like to stay heading down. But over the last few years, the last 8 years as an organization, we haven't done that, right? Until JD started to do it.
Yeah, that's my biggest issue. And that's why I think the Jets look like the spot that they're in now is because of what Maccagnan did on the offensive line and ignored that for so long. And then you get some of the injuries mixed in and missing on Becton. Like they're starting to get that fundamental point, especially if you add another first round guy. And I think they should look to add an interior player in the 3rd or 4th round. So that could potentially be a 4th one to the mix down the line. But with, you know, so many needs now, they're going to have to add something in free agency.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. Like that's why I even said Connor McGovern. Well, I don't know why he's so disrespected and overlooked. I really don't. I mean, he's a middle of the league center. He's an average center. I mean, he fills that hole for us and allows Tippett to move over. And I don't even want McGovern as my first option. I just think that we definitely should bring him in because him as a depth piece. Like if we go into the season somehow with Connor McGovern as our backup center, I think that would be fantastic.
Even better. Well, this is Green Bay now?
This is Green Bay. What's interesting about Green Bay is they had a great offensive line, even though Bakaturi didn't play, right? So they had a drafted guy from the 7th round, Rasheed Walker, and still held out at left tackle. I believe he played left tackle and still had a great year, you know, had a great year. And here's this young player they have now, which is why you know they're not re-signing Bakaturi. There's no way, because they have a guy who filled in for him and did fine this year, who's young and free. Doesn't cost them anything. But there you have it again. He's the only one that didn't return from the year before because of his injury, but everybody else was a returning starter and is a drafted player by the team. So again, I know we're not in that situation. I mean, if anything, we should just take it as this is an argument just for our football knowledge, maybe not for next year, not for the situation we're in, but as Jet fans, as we move along next, you know, as from when this ends or whatever, maybe we can all understand just what this team had done wrong from 2016 to 2020